So it's set in the Soviet Union in 1986, and it's about a group of people whose lives begin to come apart as the communist system crumbles around them. And the kind of central focus of the novel is set around Chernobyl. And so there's various people who directly or peripherally come in contact with that disaster. I really don't think I set out to write about anything in specific. I became interested in Chernobyl. And again, it's difficult to trace back the origins, but when I was 13 or 14 years old, there's a charity in Ireland called Chernobyl International who bring over children and teenagers who have been affected by the disaster basically for recuperation for summer times. And I think over the last 20 years, they've brought something like 250,000 children and teenagers to Ireland. So it's actually quite a present issue in Ireland. People are very aware of it. And so a lot of these kind of children and teenagers would be walking around my hometown when I was 13 or 14 years old. And I was very intrigued about their lives. One of the things that kind of drifted back to us was that they were living in those kind of monstrous communist apartment blocks that we all hear about. And, you know, I'm from a place that is quite horizontal. I'm from the Bogland. So I was very intrigued kind of visually, but also just about how their lives existed in those apartments. And really I just started to read about Chernobyl, and the more that I read, the more it led me to write about it. It's the consequences and the issues around it were so intriguing, and the book kind of grew exponentially from there, really. I'm actually going to Chernobyl in a month's time. And that, interestingly, so a lot of the book is set in Moscow, and the Chernobyl bits were by far the easier bits to research, actually, because there has been quite a bit written about Chernobyl. There's huge photographic archives. A lot of Western photographers have come in, and you know, there's many famous photographs of the city Pripyat, which is right next door, and it's a kind of a Marie Celeste of a city. You know, people left, you know, within an afternoon. So that kind of stuff actually was very available. Stuff about Moscow, bizarrely, was very difficult to research. There really isn't that much social photography in Moscow in the 70s and 80s. There's a lot of kind of newspaper official photography, but people walking around the street with a camera were obviously viewed as spies, quite literally, in Moscow. So I really had no idea what it looked like, and I had to kind of piece it together in my imagination. I didn't get to go over to Moscow until very late in the process, actually, so that was quite a bizarre experience to see the city, having kind of pieced it together in my imagination. My background is in devised theatre mainly, and so I'm very interested in the narratives that come from that, because it's not particularly linear. And so yeah, I think structurally that probably did help. I thought, to be honest, it would be more of an advantage, but it wasn't actually. I really had to work plot and begin to really understand the intricacies of plot in a novel, which are quite different actually than theatre. It was a very enjoyable experience to work with an editor. It's tough to answer the first question just because it took me a long time. So I started this book 9 years ago, and so it kind of grows in peaks and troughs. You know, it's had several kind of lifetimes for me in various forms. So to have a reader at the end of that process was an incredible luxury and an incredible privilege. For most of the time I was writing my own, and you know, friends occasionally will give me a little bit of feedback, but I really had no idea in terms of quality, in terms of direction. When you are kind of writing on your own in the darkness, you really don't know where you're at. So to have an editor to kind of just point to, direct you a little bit along the way. Will Hammond is my editor with Penguin, and he was incredibly useful in terms of working out the ending, actually, and beginning to just kind of piece all the material together and curate it in a sense. So yes, I would absolutely defend the profession of editors to the limit. So actually Will is a dramaturg, or was originally a dramaturg. That was his background. So I think he has a slightly similar approach in that he will kind of see where the direction of the material is going, as a really good dramaturg does. So yeah, I do think there's a parallel there to a certain extent, yeah.